Why would you take my daughter? Where is she? She shouted, trying to hit Elizabeth. Kehinde quickly held Mirabel back, pleading with her to calm down. Mirabel, please. We need to stay calm. This won't help find Mimi. Elizabeth began to cry, shaking her head. I would never hurt Mimi or anyone. I love her so much. Please believe me, she sobbed. Mirabel was a beautiful woman in her late 30s. She had long flowing hair and a smile that could light up a room. Everyone admired her for her grace and kindness. She got married to Kehinde, a rich businessman. Kehinde was tall and handsome, with a confident air about him. They both lived in Lagos, Nigeria, a bustling city full of life and energy. Mirabel and Kehinde were very happy together. They had three wonderful children, a boy called Dele, a girl named Christie, and their youngest daughter, Mimi. Dele was 7 years old, Christie was 5, and little Mimi was just 2. The children were full of life, always playing and laughing. Mirabel and Kehinde wanted to give their children the best life possible. They made sure Dele, Christie, and Mimi attended the best school in Lagos. The school had big classrooms, colorful walls, and a large playground where the children loved to play. The children had a wonderful nanny who cares for them and helped them with their needs. The nanny were kind and loving, just like Mirabel and Kehinde. One sunny morning, Mirabel and Kehinde sat at the breakfast table, discussing their day. The children were already dressed in their school uniforms, ready for the day ahead. Good morning, everyone, Mirabel greeted as she poured orange juice into glasses. Did everyone sleep well? Yes, Mommy, Dele replied with a big smile. I had a dream about flying a plane. That sounds exciting, Dele, Kehinde said, ruffling his son's hair. Maybe one day you will be a pilot. Christie looked up from her cereal and said, I want to be a doctor when I grow up. Mirabel smiled at her daughter. That's a wonderful dream, Christie. You can be anything you want to be. Little Mimi giggled and clapped her hands, though she was too young to talk about her dreams just yet. After breakfast, the nanny took the children to school. Mirabel and Kehinde headed to their company, where they worked hard every day. They were a hard-working couple who managed a big business together. Their company was very successful, and people respected them for their dedication and hard work. Kehinde often traveled around the world for business. He visited many countries, meeting important people and making deals that helped their company grow. Mirabel also played a big role in running the company. She was smart and knew how to manage things well. One day, as Mirabel was going through some papers in her office, she looked at the clock and realized it was almost lunchtime. She decided to call Kehinde, who was away on a business trip. Hello, Kehinde, Mirabel said when he answered the phone. How is your trip going? Hello, my love, Kehinde replied. The trip is going well. I just had a meeting and it went better than I expected. That's great to hear, Mirabel said with a smile. We miss you here, especially the children. I miss all of you too, Kehinde said. Please, give them a big hug for me. I will, Mirabel promised. Take care and come back soon. After finishing her work at the office, Mirabel went home. She loved spending time with her children, even though her busy schedule sometimes made it difficult. When she arrived home, she found the children playing in the living room with their nanny. Mommy, Dele, Christie, and Mimi ran to her with excitement. Hello, my darlings, Mirabel said, hugging them tightly. How was your day at school? It was fun, Mommy, Christy said. We learned about animals today. That's wonderful, Mirabel said, kissing her daughter's cheek. I'm so proud of all of you. In the evenings, Mirabel tried to spend as much time as possible with her children. She read them bedtime stories, helped them with their homework, and listened to their stories about school and friends. One evening, as Mirabel was tucking Dele into bed, he looked up at her with wide eyes. Mommy, will you and Daddy always be busy? Mirabel's heart ached at the question. She knew they worked hard, but she also knew how much their children needed them. We work hard because we want to give you the best life, Dele. But we also love you very much and always want to be with you. Dele nodded, seeming to understand. I love you, Mommy. I love you too, my sweet boy, Mirabel said, kissing his forehead. Despite their busy lives, Mirabel and Kehinde always made sure their children felt loved and cared for. They trusted the nanny to take good care of Dele, Christie and Mimi, but they also knew the importance of being there for their children as much as they could. On weekends, Mirabel and Kehinde tried to spend quality time with their family. They would take the children to the park, go for picnics, or visit fun places in Lagos. The children loved these outings and cherished the moments they spent with their parents. One Saturday, they decided to visit the beach. The sun was shining brightly and the sea was a beautiful shade of blue. The children were excited, running ahead with their buckets and spades. Look, Mommy, I found a shell, Christy exclaimed, holding up a shiny seashell. That's a beautiful shell, Christy, Mirabel said, smiling. You can add it to your collection. Dele was busy building a sand castle, while Mimi giggled as the waves tickled her tiny feet. Kehinde watched his family with a big smile on his face. This is what life is all about, Kehinde said to Mirabel. Family and happiness. Mirabel nodded in agreement. Yes, it is. We are truly blessed. As the sun began to set, they gathered their things and headed home. The children were tired but happy, and they fell asleep as soon as they got home. Mirabel and Kehinde sat in the living room, enjoying a quiet moment together. Kehinde, Mirabel said softly, I think we need to find a better balance between work and family. The children need us. Kehinde took her hand and nodded. You're right, Mirabel. We can work hard, but we must also make sure we are there for our children. They are our world. They continued living happily. Mirabel and Kehinde loved their life and their children. Every day was filled with laughter and joy. But one day, tragedy struck. Little Mimi, their youngest daughter, fell ill. She had a fever and couldn't go to school. So her nanny, Elizabeth, stayed home to take care of her. Don't worry, Mimi. You will be fine soon, Elizabeth said softly, placing a cool cloth on Mimi's forehead. Mimi nodded weakly, her eyes closing as she tried to rest. Elizabeth watched over her, making sure she was comfortable. Meanwhile, Mirabel and Kehinde took Dele and Christie to school before heading to work. As the day went on, Elizabeth received a call from her family. Her face turned pale as she listened to the news. Her mother had passed away. Tears filled her eyes, and she felt a deep sadness wash over her. She needed to go home immediately to be with her family. Stay here, Mimi. I'll be right back, Elizabeth said gently. Though she knew she couldn't take Mimi with her, she quickly went to find Maggie, the chef. Maggie, I have to leave. My mother passed away, Elizabeth explained, her voice trembling. Please look after Mimi until I get back. Maggie nodded. Of course, Elizabeth. I will take care of her. With that, Elizabeth rushed out of the house, leaving Mimi in Maggie's care. Hours passed, and the house was quiet. Mimi rested in her room, unaware of the change in her caregiver. Later that afternoon, Mirabel and Kehinde returned home. As they stepped inside, they immediately noticed the silence. Elizabeth, Maggie, Mirabel called out, but there was no response. She hurried to Mimi's room, expecting to find her little girl resting in bed, but the room was empty. Kehinde, Mimi is not here, Mirabel exclaimed, her heart pounding with fear. Kehinde's eyes widened. What do you mean? Where could she be? They searched the house frantically, calling out for Elizabeth, Maggie and Mimi, but there was no sign of them anywhere. Panic set in as they realized that their daughter and her caregiver were missing. Try calling Elizabeth, Kehinde suggested, his voice tense. Mirabel quickly dialed Elizabeth's number, but it went straight to voicemail. Her phone is off, Mirabel said, her voice shaking. Just then, the front door opened and Maggie walked in, alone. Mirabel and Kehinde rushed to her. Maggie, where is Elizabeth? Where is Mimi? Mirabel demanded. Maggie looked confused. I don't know. Elizabeth left with Mimi earlier today. She said she would be back soon, but she never returned. Kehinde clenched his fist in frustration. We need to find them. We can't just sit here and wait. They continued their search, calling out for Mimi and checking every room in the house. Hours passed and still there was no sign of Elizabeth or Mimi. Desperation set in as they realized that something was terribly wrong. We need to go pick up Dele and Christie from school, Mirabel said, trying to stay calm. Maybe Elizabeth and Mimi will be back by the time we return. They hurried to the school, picking up Dele and Christie. The children were excited to see their parents, but sensed that something was wrong. Mommy, where is Mimi? Christie asked, her eyes wide with concern. We are looking for her, sweetheart, Mirabel replied, trying to keep her voice steady. Don't worry, we will find her. As night fell, Mirabel and Kehinde grew more and more anxious. They decided to report the situation to the police. At the police station, they explained everything that had happened. We have been looking for Elizabeth and Mimi all day, but we can't find them. Kehinde said urgently, we need your help. The police officer listened carefully and nodded. We will start looking for them immediately. However, we must wait 24 hours before we can take more serious actions. Mirabel's eyes filled with tears. But we can't wait that long. Our daughter is missing. We understand your concern, ma'am, the officer said gently. We will do our best to find them as quickly as possible. Unable to wait, Mirabel and Kehinde decided to take matters into their own hands. They reached out to the agency where they had employed Elizabeth from. They called and explained the situation. We need to find Elizabeth, Mirabel said urgently. Do you have any information about where she might be? The agency staff was sympathetic but had little information to offer. We are not sure where Elizabeth is at the moment, but we will help you in any way we can. That night, Mirabel and Kehinde couldn't sleep. They stayed up, anxiously waiting for any news about their daughter. The house felt empty and cold without Mimi's laughter. Every minute felt like an eternity as they prayed for her safe return. As the first light of dawn broke, Mirabel and Kehinde were already preparing to go to the police station again. They also planned to travel to Elizabeth's village in Kwara State, hoping to find some answers. Let's hurry, Kehinde said, his voice filled with determination. We will not rest until we find our daughter. Mirabel nodded, holding back tears. We will find her, Kehinde. We have to. And so, with heavy hearts but unwavering resolve, they set out on their journey to find their beloved Mimi. They knew that no matter what it took, they would bring their daughter home safely. They journeyed to Kwara State with the address the agency provided. Mirabel and Kehinde were filled with a mix of hope and fear as they drove through the countryside. The lush green fields and small villages passed by in a blur. Their mind focused on finding Mimi. We are almost there, Kehinde said, gripping the steering wheel tightly. I just hope Elizabeth can tell us where Mimi is. Mirabel nodded, her heart pounding. She clung to the hope that they would find their daughter safe and sound. They finally reached the village and followed the directions to Elizabeth's family home. When they arrived, they saw Elizabeth sitting with her family. They were gathered under a large tree, mourning the loss of Elizabeth's mother. The air was thick with sorrow, and tears streamed down Elizabeth's face. Mirabel couldn't hold back any longer. She rushed to Elizabeth's side, grabbing her shoulders. "Elizabeth, where is Mimi?" she cried desperately. Elizabeth looked up, startled by Mirabel's sudden appearance. "Madam, what are you doing here?" she asked, her voice trembling. "We have been looking for Mimi everywhere," Mirabel said, her eyes filled with tears. "Elizabeth, please tell me where she is." Elizabeth took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. "I received a call yesterday about my mother's death," she explained. "I tried calling you, but the number wasn't connecting. I left Mimi under Maggie's care and hurried down here to Kwara." Kehinde stepped forward, his face grim. "Elizabeth, Mimi is missing. We searched everywhere, and Maggie said you took Mimi with you." Elizabeth's eyes widened in shock. "No, sir, that's not true. I left Mimi with Maggie. I would never take her without telling you." Mirabel and Kehinde exchanged worried glances. Along with them were two police officers, one of whom was a detective. The detective stepped forward, addressing Elizabeth in a calm but firm voice. "Elizabeth, we need you to come back to Lagos with us for a proper investigation," he said. "We need to find out what happened to Mimi." Mirabel's emotions overwhelmed her. She looked at Elizabeth, tears streaming down her face. "Why would you take my daughter? Where is she?" she shouted, trying to hit Elizabeth. Kehinde quickly held Mirabel back, pleading with her to calm down. "Mirabel, please. We need to stay calm. This won't help find Mimi." Elizabeth began to cry, shaking her head. "I would never hurt Mimi or anyone. I love her so much. Please believe me," she sobbed. Elizabeth's family gathered around, begging Mirabel and Kehinde to let her stay. "Please, let her mourn her mother. She didn't do anything wrong," one of her relatives pleaded. But the detective was firm. "We need to take her back to Lagos. This is a serious matter. We must find the child." Elizabeth's family reluctantly stepped back, understanding the gravity of the situation. Elizabeth stood up, wiping her tears, and looked at Mirabel and Kehinde with pleading eyes. "Please, believe me. I would never harm Mimi. I only left her with Maggie because I had to come here quickly," Elizabeth said, her voice breaking. Mirabel's heart ached with confusion and pain. She wanted to believe Elizabeth, but the fear for her missing daughter clouded her judgment. She watched as the police led Elizabeth away, her cries echoing in the air. As they made their way back to Lagos, Mirabel sat in the car, silent tears streaming down her face. Kehinde reached out and held her hand, trying to offer comfort. "We will find her, Mirabel. We have to believe that," he said softly. Mirabel nodded, though her heart was heavy with worry. "I just want our little girl back, Kehinde." With heavy hearts, but unwavering resolve, they drove away from Elizabeth's home, heading back to Lagos. They knew that no matter what it took, they would bring their daughter home safely. Once they arrived Lagos, Mirabel and Kehinde drove straight to the police station. The ride was filled with an uneasy silence, each lost in their own thoughts and fears. As soon as they arrived, the police led Elizabeth straight to the interrogation room. The detective, a stern man with a compassionate heart, looked at Elizabeth with concern. "Elizabeth," he began gently, "we need you to tell us the truth. This is a serious matter. A child is missing." Elizabeth, her eyes red and swollen from crying, shook her head. I didn't take Mimi. I left her with Maggie, I swear. The interrogation went on for hours. The detective asked her questions, trying to find any inconsistency in her story. But Elizabeth remained firm. She repeatedly insisted she had left Mimi under Maggie's care. After a long time, the detective came out of the interrogation room, his face edged with worry. Mirabel and Kehinde, who had been waiting anxiously, stood up as he approached them. She isn't admitting to taking your daughter, the detective said, his voice heavy with frustration. We need to go to your house and interrogate the chef and the gatekeeper. They might know something. Mirabel and Kehinde nodded, their hearts pounding with a mix of hope and fear. They drove home, the weight of the situation pressing down on them. As they arrived, Maggie and the gatekeeper, a quiet man named Ade, were standing in the driveway, looking worried. The detective wasted no time. Maggie, we need to ask you some questions. It's very important you tell us the truth. Maggie nodded, her face pale. Of course, officer. I will tell you everything I know. Did Elizabeth leave with Mimi yesterday? The detective asked. Maggie hesitated for a moment, then nodded. Yes, she did. I saw her take Mimi with her when she left. The detective turned to Ade. Did you see anything unusual yesterday? Did Elizabeth leave with Mimi? Ade, who had been watching quietly, nodded as well. Yes, sir. I saw Elizabeth carrying Mimi when she walked out of the house. Mirabel and Kehinde exchanged confused and worried glances. Why were Maggie and Ade saying that Elizabeth took Mimi when Elizabeth insisted she left her with Maggie? This is making no sense, Mirabel whispered to Kehinde, her voice trembling. Who is telling the truth? The detective, seeing their confusion, spoke firmly. We need to take Elizabeth into custody until we can figure this out. We will continue our investigation. Elizabeth was brought out from the police car, tears streaming down her face as she looked at Maggie. Please, Maggie, tell them the truth. I left Mimi with you. Maggie looked away, her face expressionless. I already told them what I saw. Elizabeth's cries echoed in the air as she was led away. Mirabel and Kehinde watched, their hearts breaking. They wanted to believe Elizabeth, but with Maggie and Ade's statement, doubt clouded their minds. At the police station, Elizabeth was locked up, her cries filling the small cell. Mirabel and Kehinde stood outside, their hearts heavy with sorrow. Why would Elizabeth take Mimi? Mirabel asked, her voice choked with emotion. I trusted her. She loved Mimi. Kehinde held her close, trying to comfort her. We don't know for sure, Mirabel. We need to find out the truth. Let's hope the police can uncover what really happened. As they turned into night, the investigation continued. The police searched for any clues that could lead them to Mimi. They checked phone records, questioned neighbors, and followed every lead they could find. Mirabel and Kehinde returned home, their house feeling emptier than ever. They sat in the living room, holding each other, their minds racing with worry and fear. How could this happen? Mirabel whispered. We were so careful. We trusted our staffs. Kehinde sighed deeply. Sometimes, people we trust can betray us, but we need to stay strong. We will find Mimi. As Mirabel sat down on the couch in the living room, trying to hold back her tears, Dele ran to her, his small face filled with worry. Mommy, what happened to Mimi? Where is she? He asked, his voice trembling. Mirabel took a deep breath, trying to stay strong for her son. Mimi will be home soon, Dele. We are doing everything we can to find her, she said, hugging him tightly. Christie joined them, wrapping her small arms around her mother and brother. Mommy, we miss Mimi. Will she really come back? She asked, her big eyes filled with concern. Mirabel kissed Christie's forehead. Yes, my dear, she will come back. We just have to be patient and stay strong. The children hugged their mother, trying to comfort her. They all sat together on the couch, holding onto each other for support. Later that day, Mirabel and Kehinde decided to go back to the police station. They needed to talk to Elizabeth again, hoping she might remember something that could help them find Mimi. When they arrived at the police station, they demanded to speak with Elizabeth. The detective escorted them to the interrogation room where Elizabeth was sitting, looking tired and scared. "Elizabeth, please," Mirabel begged, tears streaming down her face. "Tell us where our child is. We need to know." Elizabeth looked up at them, her eyes filled with sorrow. "Madam, I swear, I don't know. I left Mimi with Maggie. You have to believe me." Mirabel's frustration boiled over. She grabbed the collar of Elizabeth's dress, shaking her. "Tell me where my daughter is. Where is she?" she screamed. The detective and Kehinde quickly intervened, pulling Mirabel away. "Mirabel, stop! This won't help us find Mimi," Kehinde said, holding her back. Elizabeth started crying, her voice trembling. "I would never hurt Mimi. I love her like my own child. Please believe me." The detective gently led Mirabel and Kehinde out of the room. As they left the police station, Mirabel couldn't stop crying. Kehinde wrapped his arms around her, trying to console her as they drove away. "Mirabel, we will find her. We just need to stay calm and think clearly," Kehinde said softly, holding her hand. Back at home, Dele and Christie were sitting in their room, talking quietly. Dele looked at his sister, his face serious. "Christie, I don't think Auntie Elizabeth would hurt Mimi. She's always been so nice to us." Christie nodded. "I believe her too. Maybe we should try to find out what Maggie is up to. If Auntie Elizabeth didn't take Mimi, then Maggie must know something." Dele agreed. "We need to find a way to expose her. But how?" When Mirabel and Kehinde returned home, Dele and Christie approached them. "Daddy, can we go to the police station and talk to Auntie Elizabeth? We want to hear her own side of the story," Dele asked. Kehinde hesitated, glancing at Mirabel. "I don't know, Dele. It's a difficult situation." "Please, Daddy," Christie added. "We just want to talk to her." After much hesitation, Kehinde agreed, though Mirabel decided to stay home. "All right, but you have to promise to be respectful and listen carefully," Kehinde said. "We promise," Dele and Christie said in unison. They drove to the police station, and the children were led to speak with Elizabeth. When Elizabeth saw them, her face lit up with relief and joy. She knelt down and hugged them tightly. "Thank you for coming, my darlings," Elizabeth said, her voice filled with emotion. "I didn't take Mimi. I left her with Maggie because I had to go to Kwara. Please believe me." Dele looked into her eyes, seeing the sincerity there. "We believe you, Auntie Elizabeth. We know you wouldn't hurt Mimi." Christie nodded. "We want to help you. We need to find a way to expose Maggie. Can you tell us everything that happened?" Elizabeth took a deep breath and began to recount the events of the day Mimi disappeared. "I got a call that my mother had died. I was so upset and in a hurry. I told Maggie to watch over Mimi because I had to leave quickly. I tried calling your parents, but I couldn't get through. I never took Mimi with me." The children listened intently, absorbing every details. They believed Elizabeth and were determined to help prove her innocence. "We will find a way, Auntie Elizabeth. We'll figure out what Maggie did," Dele promised, his small hand gripping hers tightly. Elizabeth smiled through her tears. "Thank you, Dele. Thank you, Christie. I know you can do it. Just be careful and stay safe." The visit gave Elizabeth a glimmer of hope, and it strengthened the children's resolve to uncover the truth. They hugged her tightly before leaving the police station with their father. On the way home, Dele and Christie talked quietly in the back seat. We need a plan, Dele said. We have to watch Maggie closely and see if she does anything suspicious. Christy nodded. Maybe we can check her room or listen to her phone calls. We have to find proof. Kehinde listened to their conversation, feeling a mixture of pride and worry. He admired their determination, but was concerned about their safety. Be careful, you two. If you find anything, come to me or your mother right away, he instructed. Yes, Daddy, they replied. When they arrived home, Mirabel was waiting anxiously. She hugged Dele and Christie tightly, feeling a little better seeing them so determined. Did you talk to Auntie Elizabeth? What did she say? She asked. We believe her, Mommy. She didn't take Mimi. We need to find out what Maggie knows, Dele explained. Mirabel nodded, a spark of hope igniting in her heart. All right, let's work together and find our Mimi. And so, with a renewed sense of purpose, the family united in their quest to uncover the truth and bring Mimi home. They knew it wouldn't be easy, but they were determined to find their beloved daughter and make their family whole again. That day, Dele and Christie began trailing Maggie, watching her every move with newfound determination. They noticed that Maggie often made suspicious movements and phone calls, always looking around as if to make sure no one was watching her. The siblings decided they needed help to uncover what Maggie was hiding. Dele thought of their cousin Michael, who was in his first year at the University of Lagos. Michael was known in the family as a tech guru, always tinkering with gadgets and computers. Dele decided to call him. Hey Michael, Dele said when his cousin answered. We need your help. It's about Mimi. Michael's voice became serious. What's going on, Dele? Tell me everything. Dele explained the situation, how they believed Maggie was hiding something, and how Elizabeth had been falsely accused. Michael listened carefully, then agreed to help. I will come over right away, he said. Within an hour, Michael arrived at their house. He was a tall, lanky young man with glasses and a backpack full of tech gear. Dele and Christie greeted him eagerly. Thanks for coming, Michael, Dele said. We need to figure out what Maggie is up to. Michael nodded. Let's get to work. First, we need to get access to her phone. If we can connect it to my system, I can track her calls and messages. The kids nodded, understanding the plan. They knew they had to be sneaky to get Maggie's phone without her noticing. That night, after dinner, Maggie was in the kitchen cleaning up. Christie decided it was the perfect time to put their plan into action. Christie walked into the kitchen and smiled at Maggie. Auntie Maggie, can I have a cup of milk, please? She asked sweetly. Maggie turned to get the milk, and as she did, Christie noticed the phone sitting on the shelf. She glanced quickly at Dele and Michael, who were hiding around the corner. Christie took the phone and handed it to them before Maggie could notice. Dele and Michael quickly connected the phone to Michael's laptop. Michael typed furiously on the keyboard, setting up the tracking system. Christie returned to the kitchen, holding her milk and sipping it slowly. Maggie, now done with her cleaning, stood there, waiting for Christie to finish her milk. Are you almost done? She asked, a hint of impatience in her voice. Christie shook her head, sipping her milk even more slowly. It's really good milk, Auntie Maggie, she said innocently. Maggie sighed, crossing her arms. She didn't want to leave until Christie was out of the kitchen. Dele then walked in, pretending to be casual. Auntie Maggie, Mom and Dad need to talk to you, he said. Maggie frowned but nodded, leaving the kitchen quickly. Once she was gone, Dele and Michael hurriedly returned the phone to its place. Christie finished her milk and joined them, and they all shared a triumphant high five before leaving the kitchen. On her way of the children's scheme, Maggie continued with her evening routine, thinking everything was fine. She had no idea that her phone was now being monitored. Michael set up his laptop in Dele's room where they could track Maggie's calls and messages without being disturbed. Alright, let's see what we find, Michael said, his fingers flying over the keyboard. The screen showed a series of numbers and messages. It looks like she has been making a lot of calls to one number, Michael observed. Let's listen on her next call. The next day, as Maggie went about her chores, the kids kept a close eye on her. They watched as she made a call, and Michael, from his hidden spot, recorded the conversation. Yes, everything is going according to plan, Maggie said into the phone. They don't suspect a thing. I will make sure it stays that way. Michael, Dele and Christie exchanged worried glances. Maggie was clearly involved in something shady. They needed more evidence to prove her guilt. Later that day, a message popped up on Michael's laptop. It was from Maggie's phone. The message read, Madam, come carry this pikin wey you keep here. She don dey cry and no gree eat food. If anything happen to her, our hand no dey oo. Michael's eyes widened as he read the message. He rushed to Mirabel and Kehinde's room, bursting in with urgency. Uncle Kehinde, Auntie Mirabel, you need to see this, he exclaimed, showing them the laptop screen. Mirabel and Kehinde quickly scanned the message. Their faces turning pale. This means Mimi is still alive, but we need to act fast, Kehinde said, his voice shaking with a mix of relief and anxiety. Kehinde immediately summoned the detective. They explained everything to him, showing him the messages and recordings they had gathered. The detective listened carefully, nodding as he took in the information. Meanwhile, Maggie, unaware of the event unfolding, was in her room making frantic phone calls. She was speaking to the sender of the message, begging him to hold on. Please, just keep her safe for a little while longer. I will come soon. Just make sure nothing happens to her, she pleaded. The detective asked the family to remain calm and observe Maggie's next actions. We need to see what she plans to do next. Stay in the living room and act normal. I'll be hiding and ready to intervene, he instructed. The whole family sat in the living room, trying to act as naturally as possible. They watched TV and chat, but their minds were racing with thoughts of Mimi. The tension in the room was palpable. After a while, Maggie emerged from her room, carrying a small bag of clothes. Her face was a mixture of determination and nervousness. Mr. Kehinde, Mrs. Mirabel, my father is really sick. I need to return home to take care of him, she said, trying to sound sincere. Kehinde stood up, his eyes narrowing. Are you running away, Maggie? He asked, his voice calm but firm. Maggie shook her head quietly. No, sir, I will be back. I just need to see my father. Before Maggie could make another move, the detective stepped out from his hiding place. Maggie, you are under arrest for kidnapping, he announced, moving towards her. Maggie's face turned white with shock and confusion. I did nothing, I swear, I did nothing wrong, she cried out, backing away. Mirabel, with tears in her eyes, played the audio recording of Maggie's phone calls. You took our daughter, Maggie. We had everything, she said, her voice trembling with emotion. She also showed Maggie the text messages. Maggie stood frozen, her mouth opening and closing without a sound. She was caught. The reality of her actions sank in, and she knew there was no escaping it now. Finally, she broke down and confessed. Yes, I took Mimi away. I wanted to see Elizabeth suffer. She always got small love and favor from the Kehinde family. She always acted like she was better than the rest of us. Maggie spat, her voice filled with bitterness. I hated Elizabeth. I wanted her to feel pain. Everyone in the room was stunned into silence. The realization of Maggie's jealousy and malice was hard to digest. Mirabel, her voice shaking with a mixture of fury and sorrow, asked, Where is Mimi? Where have you kept our daughter? Maggie looked down, tears streaming down her face. She's with a man I paid to keep her. He's been taking care of her, but she's safe. I just wanted to teach Elizabeth a lesson. The detective stepped forward, placing handcuffs on Maggie's wrist. You will lead us to the man and to Mimi. If anything happens to that child, you will be held fully responsible, he said sternly. As Maggie was led away, Mirabel and Kehinde clung to each other, their emotions a whirlwind of relief and anger. They had found out who took their daughter, but the journey to bring her home was not over yet. The detective quickly organized a team to follow Maggie's directions to the location where Mimi was being kept. Michael, Dele and Christie stayed behind, waiting anxiously for news. Mirabel and Kehinde joined the police, determined to see their daughter safe. Maggie led the police to a small rundown house on the outskirts of Lagos. As they approached, the detective signaled for silence and caution. They surrounded the house, ready to act at moment's notice. Maggie pointed to the door, her hands shaking. She's in there. The detective nodded, and with a swift motion, the police entered the house. Inside, they found a man sitting nervously on a chair, and in the corner, a small figure huddled on a makeshift bed. Mimi, Mirabel cried, rushing forward as soon as she saw her daughter. Mimi looked up, her eyes wide with fear and confusion. Mommy, she whispered, recognizing her mother's voice. Mirabel scooped Mimi into her arms, holding her tightly. Oh, my baby, we have been looking everywhere for you, she sobbed. Kehinde joined them, tears streaming down his face as he hugged them both. We are here now, Mimi. You are safe, he said softly. The police arrested the man who had been holding Mimi and took him away. Maggie too was arrested, tears of regret and guilt streaming down her face. As they drove back home, Mimi nestled safely between her parents. Mirabel and Kehinde thanked the detective and the police for their swift action. They were finally bringing their daughter home. Back at the house, Michael, Dele and Christie waited anxiously. When the car pulled up and they saw Mimi step out with their parents, they rushed forward, tears of joy in their eyes. Mimi! Dele and Christie cried, hugging their sister tightly. Michael smiled, relieved and proud of what they had accomplished. Welcome home, Mimi, he said gently. The family was reunited and the nightmare was over. Elizabeth was released immediately after Maggie's confession, and she stepped out of the police station. Mirabel and Kehinde rushed to her, their faces filled with remorse and relief. Elizabeth, we are so sorry, Mirabel said, tears streaming down her face. We should have believed you. Please forgive us. Elizabeth looked at them, her own eyes wet with tears, but she managed a small smile. I forgive you. I know you are just worried about Mimi. Kehinde stepped forward and took Elizabeth's hand. We can never repay you for what you have been through because of us. Please, come back to our home after your mother's funeral. We need you and the children need you. Elizabeth nodded, grateful for the apology and understanding. I will come back, but I need to go home now and be with my family. Mirabel and Kehinde insisted on giving Elizabeth a large sum of money to help with the funeral expenses. They also provided a driver to take her back to Kwara State, ensuring she had everything she needed for the journey. Thank you so much, Elizabeth said, hugging them both. I will return after the funeral. As Elizabeth left, they returned home and decided to address another issue. They called the gatekeeper Ade, who had falsely accused Elizabeth under Maggie's influence. Ade, we need to talk, Kehinde said sternly as Ade stood before them, looking nervous. Sir, madam, I'm so sorry. Maggie forced me to lie. She said she would ruin me if I didn't. Ade pleaded, tears in his eyes. Kehinde shook his head. You should have told us the truth, Ade. You put our family through so much pain. We won't arrest you, but you can no longer work here. Ade bowed his head, knowing he deserved this. I understand, sir. Thank you for your mercy. With Ade gone and Maggie in police custody, Mirabel and Kehinde focused on reuniting their family. Mimi, still shaking but safe, was showered with love and care. Mirabel held her close, whispering comforting words. Mimi, you are safe now. We will always protect you, she said softly. Michael was happy to have helped, and Dele and Christie were overjoyed to have their little sister back. They played together, trying to bring some normalcy back into their lives. A few weeks later, Elizabeth returned as promised. The family welcomed her back with open arms. Elizabeth, we are so glad to have you back, Mirabel said, hugging her. I'm happy to be back, Elizabeth replied. I missed all of you. They decided to hire a new chef and gatekeeper, this time with stern warnings and thorough background checks. They were determined to never let such a situation happen again. Mirabel and Kehinde also made a promise to each other and their children. From now on, we will spend more time together as a family. Kehinde said, work is important, but nothing is more important than our family. They began setting aside time each day to be with their children, playing games, reading stories, and simply enjoying each other's company. The house, once filled with tension and fear, was now filled with laughter and love. Elizabeth continued to live with them, becoming an even more integral part of the family. She was there for all the important moments, from birthdays to school plays. The bond between her and the children grew stronger every day. Years passed, and the children grew up. Dele, Christie, and Mimi all did well in school, eventually attending high school and university. They often looked back on the difficult times they had faced and felt grateful for the love and support that had carried them through. Elizabeth, who had been like a second mother to the children, eventually got married. The family celebrated her wedding with joy, knowing she would always be a part of their lives. Mirabel and Kehinde watched their children grow with pride. They had faced many obstacles, but they had overcome them together. Their family bond was stronger than ever. One evening, as they sat in the living room, reflecting on their journey, Mirabel smiled at her husband. We did it, Kehinde. We made it through everything. Kehinde nodded, holding her hand. Yes, we did. And we did it together. Our family is our greatest strength. As they looked around the room, filled with laughter and love, they knew they had truly overcome every obstacle. Their family was whole, and their hearts were full. The lesson from this story is about the importance of trust, forgiveness, and family. Mirabel and Kehinde learned that trusting the right people is very important. When they doubted Elizabeth, they made a mistake, but they also learned to forgive and ask for forgiveness. It is important to believe in the people who care for you and to be ready to say sorry when you are wrong. The story also teaches that family should always come first. Mirabel and Kehinde realized that spending time with their children and being there for them is the most important thing. Work is important, but family and love are what truly matter. Lastly, the story shows that with love, determination, and support, families can overcome any obstacle. By working together and staying strong, Mirabel, Kehinde, and their children were able to bring Mimi back home and become even closer. Thank you for watching this amazing story about Kehinde and Mirabel on African Stories. If you liked it and felt inspired with their journey, please show your support by clicking the like button, sharing with your friends, and leaving a comment below. To see more interesting stories and learn about different cultures, subscribe to African Stories and don't forget to ring the notification bell so you never miss a new story. Your support means a lot and helps us bring more stories to you. Until we meet again, stay connected, stay inspired, and keep smiling.